Legends and Losers is brought to you by NetSuite by Oracle. Learn how to grow your business at netsuite.com/legends. On this episode, how to be real in an unreal world, how to produce massive ongoing results, and how entrepreneur Jen Groover became a one-woman brand. All right. Hey ho, let's go. Hello, my legendary friends. This is Christopher Lochhead, and welcome to another, frankly, mind-blowing conversation on Legends and Losers. If you're new to Legends and Losers, we aspire to have authentic dialogues, real conversations with great people about what it really takes to design a legendary business and a legendary life. And we're different from what you hear on your traditional interview show. If you take a step back, the vast majority of interviews you and I have ever heard kind of work this way. You have a highly accomplished journalist who's a host. You have a highly successful person who's been media trained. Their PR people have given them their 3 key talking points. And what you and I experience is essentially a highly produced collision of the hosts and producers' prefabricated narrative and the guests' 3 key talking points. And look, the more I experience that, the more I've had enough of it, because there's something disingenuous, there's something inauthentic about it. And so on Legends and Losers, we aspire to have real conversations. And the experience we hope you have is not one of a prefabricated narrative, but one of eavesdropping on what hopefully is a great conversation. We're trying to catch legends in a bottle. Yeah, I guess that's a good way of saying it. We're trying to catch a legend in a bottle, lightning in a bottle, in what I think might be becoming the lost art of how do you have a great conversation. Matt Fleckelstein calls us the best ride on the internet. Bob O'Brien says we're edgy and inspiring. And Les Schmidt says Legends and Losers is what podcasting is meant to be. And man, do we have a great Legends and Losers conversation today. Our guest is none other than the legendary one-woman brand entrepreneur, speaker, writer, motivator, Jen Groover. And I'll give you the complete lowdown on Jen in a moment. I met her through my dear friend Tim Rode and all the good folks at One Life Fully Lived. And we have a fascinating conversation that I think you'll find very illuminating. Now, as you might have noticed off the top, we are sponsored by our good friends at NetSuite. And NetSuite is for growing companies. And so if you're a company that's potentially outgrown QuickBooks, or maybe spreadsheets and manual processes, old ways of doing things are driving you nuts, costing you time, costing you money, then now is probably the time to move your business to the cloud. NetSuite by Oracle is the business management software that handles every aspect of your business in one super easy to use cloud platform. With NetSuite, you save time and money and unneeded headaches and aggravations and pains in the wherever you get pains, because NetSuite helps you manage your sales, finance, accounting, orders, manufacturing, if you're in that kind of business, and human resources, all from your desk and even your smartphone. Over 40,000 amazing growth-oriented entrepreneurial businesses use NetSuite to manage their business, and now it's available to you. The power of the world's most popular cloud management system is more affordable than you think. So I would encourage you to go to netsuite.com/legends. For Legends and Losers listeners, NetSuite is really empowering you to unleash the full power of your business's growth. And they're offering an opportunity to hang out with a growth expert to turbocharge the growth in your business. So if you want an hour-long conversation with a growth expert in your field, go to netsuite.com/legends. That's netsuite.com/legends. And don't forget, when you support NetSuite, you support Legends and Losers. Now, Jen Groover, or as she likes to be called, just Groover. So you'll hear me call her that because that's what she likes to be called. As I mentioned, Success Magazine calls her a one-woman brand. Entrepreneur Magazine says she's a, quote, leading serial entrepreneur. She was a UN delegate to the first ever global accelerator for the Global Entrepreneurs Council for the UN. Her big success started with the creation of a consumer product for women called the Butler Bag, which has gone on to become a multi-million-dollar product line. Her idea was a simple one, which is how do I have a functional bag for the modern era, but that is attractive. And that ultimately turned into the Butler bag, which has turned into a monster brand. She's also the creator of Leader Girls and Empowered by Jen Groover. She's also an advisor and a partner for a new company called Fuzzio. I hope I'm saying that right. Fuzzio. Started by none other than Tiki Barber and Mark Gerson. Groover has been or is a contributor to ABC, CBS, CNBC, NBC, MSNBC, CNBC, Fox News, Fox Business News, and the CW. She's literally been everywhere. She early on, she was a big deal on QVC, and her products are featured on QVC. And she's the author of some wonderful books, including What If and Why Not, The Operator's Manual for Life, and hashtag Empowered, which is based on her PBS special. Of course, she has a PBS special. Groover has been on the Huffington Post, Entrepreneur Magazine, in the Wall Street Journal, the Oprah Magazine, Redbook, People, US Weekly, and now here she is, a one-woman wrecking ball of results, Jen Groover, on Legends and Losers.
I was on a interview this morning, and we were talking about, the topic was truth versus training, and how many of us are trained. Like for me, for example, the topic really stemmed from all the media training. So in the media training, especially old traditional media, your hair always had to be down, your makeup always had to be, you could never go on television with your hair in a ponytail. And then, clothes wise had to be a certain way for guys, for girls. And now with new media, the rules are different, and people can be more authentic and truthful to who they really are. And one of my clients was having a really hard time with this. She has a podcast, and she was being interviewed on somebody else's Facebook Live that also has a podcast as well. And the girl was just being who she was. And she has this huge following, but it was not media polished. So my client was like, oh my gosh, this girl's hair's not even done. She's at her house, the cat's walking across the table, and her grandmom's in the background getting medicine. And she was horrified. And I said to her, I go, well, that's just because of your training. I mean, she's got this huge niche because she's being authentic. Like, that's kind of entertaining. Like, the cat comes by, the grandmom comes in. Like, it's really real. She's just being who she is. And that's what more people want to see. And so we had this really in-depth conversation about, like, how many belief systems we're programmed with that when you break them down are kind of silly, and we just abide by them because we were programmed that way. Like, you said you're going to meet a new client, so you throw on the suit, but that's not really who you are, right? Like, and so you get there and you're like, I just got dressed up for you. It's kind of like, when people start dating, I always say the representative shows up for like the first 6 to 10 dates, and then eventually you get to see like who the real person is. And so it's the same thing.
Always that a turning point always is the first fart, right?
right, exactly. Or just like first time you're sick and you just can't get it together.
Yeah. And one of you is cleaning up the other's, puke somewhere for some reason, and it's like, oh fuck, here we are. So I guess we're here now, in terms of this stage of our relationship where we can clean each other's puke up.
Yeah, and the mask can now go away, and we can actually be really real. But like, why aren't we in the beginning? Like, one of the examples I used today is back in the day of traveling, when going on airplanes, people would get really dressed up. That's really freaking uncomfortable. I mean, I travel all the time, and my stationary, like standard yoga pants and a zip, like a hoodie, and that's what I'm wearing because I want to be comfortable. Like, why would I want to sit on a plane with like a dress I can barely breathe in and heels and my feet uncomfortable? Like, who made that belief system up? And
you don't like to wear Spanx on the plane?
Oh, I don't. Sorry, Sara Blakely. I luckily don't ever wear Spanx. not yet.
I was trying to make a snakes on the plane joke, but I don't know that it really worked that well. But
yeah.
Do you know Sarah by any chance?
Yeah. We used to do a ton of the Donnie Deutsch show together. The Big Idea.
You do? Holy shit! What's she like?
She's awesome. She's really cool. She's fun. She's definitely a driver, but in a very feminine way, and she's cool. Yeah.
She's one of my all-time heroes, and she's a category designer, and she probably doesn't even know it. She designed a whole new category, and I think what she did was so genius. I don't use the product, but I'm married to a female person, so I have a bunch of the product. Um, but what I do know, so I don't really understand the product per se, but what I do know is, if she'd called it a Girdle 2.0, you and
Yeah.
I are not talking about it right now, Groover.
And she's not a
Right?
billionaire. I mean, she was the first female billionaire.
I love her. I mean, she's an entrepreneur, category designer, billionaire, and she's created a category product and company that is hugely valuable and hugely respected. I mean, the people that I know who use this product fucking love it, and they view it as and this is what I love about it from a category design perspective. She created a new distinction in undergarment, right? With
Yeah.
the concept of shapewear as opposed to a girdle or a bra or underwear or all the other things she could have called it.
Yeah. Well, she did an amazing job. And, for everyone who's listening, who doesn't know the story, it's
There's no one listening, Groover. It's just you and me.
oh,
We're just
okay.
we're just getting together for a beer.
Okay, cool. So, most people don't realize that Sarah Blakely was told no a bunch of times, and she almost packed it up and went home with the dream. And the guy wanted
Told no from who?
Manufacturers, that she didn't know how to manufacture it. She went to some different factories. Every manufacturer was like, "This is stupid. These girdle things already exist. This doesn't make sense. Why would
But
you?"
if she was going to pay them money, why would they even care?
Because I think she wanted them to invest in it as well.
Ah.
And the one, they were like, "Why would you cut the feet off of stockings? Like, that doesn't even make sense." Because that was the first version, is she cut the feet off the stockings. And then the one factory guy went home and told his daughter about the idea, and the daughter's like, that's really brilliant. Women would want that. And then the guy called her back, and that's how it turned it around for her. But she was about to pack that idea up and go home with it. And man, not only would her story be different, but what women can aspire for as her as a role model could be so different, would be so different right now.
I'm sure she's a huge role model to women, but I hope you take this away. I mean, I could give a fuck that she's a woman. She's one of my heroes because she is a thoroughbred category designer. She's an intuitive category designer. She somehow, and I've never met her. I wouldn't know her if she walked in this room. By the way, I would love an introduction. I would absolutely love to just try to give her a "we're not worthy." I would love to have her on Legends and Losers. But that said, these people who have this natural intuition that in order for my innovation to exist, I can't do traditional marketing. I have to teach the world to understand why this thing's different and why they should think about it the way I think about it, and sort of enroll them in their obsession, right? And then when they naturally do that, and it becomes a multi-billion-dollar category, and then in her case, of course, she executed on delivering the product and the company. Do you have any idea, Groover, what market share she's got today in the shapewear space?
I don't, but I'd imagine it's like majority, because she's knocked herself off at every price point. She was a huge role model for me in how I built the Butler Bag Company. One of the biggest things I took from her modeling is the storytelling component. Just like what you said, she just went out and kept telling her story over and over and over again. And the story was the story I just told you about the man, everyone saying no. The man finally tells his daughter says it's a great idea. He calls her back. And so it begins. And the same thing for me with the Butler Bag Company is I created it because I was an overwhelmed mom of twins. My kids were crying in the grocery store. I can't find my credit card. I think seriously, as far as women have come in, as far as innovations come in our society, women accept a bucket for a handbag. Like, we literally don't complain about this. And
they were like, before you correct me if I'm wrong, because this is not exactly my neighborhood of expertise, but the bags you used to see a lot of gals carrying were like sort of the giant, I don't know what they were called, but they were the size of beach bags, right?
Yeah, they still do.
Maybe they were functional. I don't know. You could tell me, but they certainly, they were kind of ugly. These giant beach bags full of all their kid shit and whatever other shit they got, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when did you have this aha that there was a different way to bag, so to speak, for the new mom?
Yeah. So, I had that grocery store moment of panic and frustration. And it was, I kept walking out the store that day thinking, there's got to be a better way. I mean, I don't know what the solution is. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a designer. I can't really even draw a stick figure very well. And about 9 months later, I was unloading my dishwasher, had the bird's eye view of the knives, forks, and spoons in my dishwasher tray. And I thought to myself, that's it. That's how I want everything in my handbag to be. Standing up straight. So I took my dishwasher tray out of my dishwasher. I stuck it in my handbag, got all my contents so perfectly organized. And I was like, this is the solution to the problem. And that's where really began my journey. My scavenger hunt to success began at that moment.
Your scavenger hunt to success. I love that.
Yeah.
And what I love about the Butler bag story is it's so prototypical of the legendary entrepreneur category designer story. You're the person having the problem, right? You're experiencing the problem.
Totally.
And you have this moment where were you in the grocery store when you had the moment?
Yeah. I mean, I literally had, my twins were newborns at the time. I stuck them down on the floor in their car seats. And I was trying to find my credit card. I couldn't. I literally took my handbag and dumped the entire contents in front of the cashier because my kids were screaming, crying at the same time. All these people were behind me, like rolling their eyes. I'm panicking, sweating, like, oh my God, I'm holding up this line full of people. And at that I walked out the store that night shaking my head, like, seriously? Why are women accepting this? This is ludicrous. And
this aggression will not stand, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's insane. And my mom had this mantra that we were ingrained in our brain. You are not allowed to complain about something unless you back it up with a solution. And as a child,
hold on, let me slow you down there, Groover. Say that again.
You are not allowed to complain about something unless you back it up with a solution.
How old were you when your mom started to say that stuff to you?
Probably about 5. I mean, how old are you when you start complaining about things? 5 or 6. And I hated it as a child, and it teaches a child to be an inventor. It taught me to be an inventor because I would go from a place of a problem, and I wasn't allowed to talk about my problem until I presented the solution to my problem at the same time.
Well, and what I love is that insight from the dishwasher, right? Because the dishwasher, and I never would have thought about it quite this way until you just said it, but the dishwasher comes, if you will, pre-organized for us, right?
Yep.
So we don't have to think about it.
Correct.
But you're right. A handbag, or for that matter, a backpack or a briefcase, it might have compartments here and there, but it's not organized in that same kind of way, right? And your bags are like, you have compartments and sections, and I don't know. You tell me how I should think about it.
Yeah, so it's all compartmentalized. So think of like the 6-tier dishwasher tray. That was the first design style where you just look in the bag and there's the 6 compartments, and on each side there's like a place where you could slip like files down or a magazine or a laptop. So then it actually creates even more layers for you to put stuff organized in. Like, so you have your stuff in your compartment, you have maybe your laptop down one side, files down the other side, and then you could put your umbrella on top or your makeup case on top or your shoe bag on top. And so it just created so much more space.
Your what bag on top?
Shoe bag. Like if you...
Did you say shoe?
Shoe bag.
Shoe. At first, I thought you said chew. I was like, do ladies chew so much tobacco these days they need a separate bag outside their bag for their chew? I'm sorry.
Yeah, shoe, because, women who are wearing heels like to put on flip-flops or flats when they don't need to have the heels on. So a shoe bag. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have different ones for makeup, and you have different apps or applications for different bags. Am I understanding that right?
Correct. Yes.
And you give them fun names, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Tell me some of the names. I like these names.
like Butler Basics, Butler Beauty, Butler Backpack. And then, I invented that same time period, the first ever collapsible luggage. If you think about luggage, it's just this empty thing that takes up space in your house. And if you live in the city, so for my frustration would come in my apartment in New York, because it's a 1-bedroom apartment. There's not much storage space. And I'd always have this luggage just sitting in my room. And so I thought, like, why doesn't it collapse down? And so I invented it so that each side you can unzip or fold it in and then slip it under your bed.
It's so awesome. Again, I have the problem, but I decided to do something about it. And what I love about both those examples is, at least in the part of the world that I live and have lived for the last, 21 or so years, when we celebrate entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurs we celebrate are geniuses who wrote an algorithm and created this carbidingulator and went to Stanford and all that. And I am in no way disrespecting that. That's awesome. And that's a huge part of what Silicon Valley is. And there's this other part of entrepreneurship, which is, hey, you don't have to build a space shuttle or a new giant carbidingulator. You could actually reimagine the bag and have the balls of Groover and fucking create a new category of collapsible bag for people who live in small apartments or frankly, travel in Europe, right? You roll into a hotel in downtown Paris and what's the first fucking thing you notice? This hotel room's tiny.
Oh my gosh, so tiny.
Right? So, or I'll never forget the first time I went to Germany and saw the bed. I was like, that's the fucking bed? I thought it was like a bench. You put your shoes on, you put your ass on this thing as you put your shoes on. It's the fucking bed, right? Totally. So there's a lot of people who are space constrained, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, by the way, the smallest hotel I've ever stayed in, smallest room, I should say, I've ever stayed in was in London last year. Man, it was so small and so expensive. I was cracking up like, this is the most expensive tiny room I've ever stayed in my entire life. Being exposed to QVC really helped inspire my inventor mindset. I had QVCs near where I live in Philadelphia. And a lot of my friends from college, as they graduated college, QVC was pretty new, and all went to work for QVC. And I paid attention to it because that's where so many of my friends were employed. And my degree being in psychology, I was really curious about that human behavior, like the storytelling to evoke human behaviors where people would feel the need to buy constantly. And
because if this is shitty of me, then you can just whack me under the table. But when I happen upon QVC and QVC and HSN are now together, right?
No, they're still separate.
I thought they merged.
Not yet. Nope.
Oh, okay. Then I'm confused. But anyway, and they got, I don't know, a fucking mug or an umbrella or, a seemingly what I would consider very basic consumer item. And there's 2 or 3 people and they're talking about this thing like it was made by fucking Michelangelo himself. And they're telling you about this whole fucking, all this backstory and the thing's grandparents and its cousins. And I'm like, it's a fucking umbrella.
But it was emotionally evoking story that made you think that you needed that umbrella and you needed it now. What I always say, I got my master's in business at QVC because the first thing, so before
How did you get started there, Groover?
One of my good friends, when I was in the fitness industry, one of my good friends was a producer, and she would ask me to go on air as a spokesperson with different fitness products. And back then I was like, oh no, hell no, no. And by the way, the reason I would say that is because when I was a kid, my mom had a TV show. You think I'm ballsy? Oh, nothing compared to what my mom was.
What's your mom's name?
Marianne Groover.
And what was her TV show? What was Marianne's TV show?
It was called For You and About You. And it was basically, my mom ran campaigns for politicians. She really wanted to use her voice to make change and really be able.
What kind of change was she trying to make?
Well, I think it all started with how about like when politicians say they're going to do something to actually do it, or
Oh, come on. We wouldn't expect that anybody would actually fucking do what they promised.
or like try not to just destroy other people's life for the sake of your own gain. Or, actually use a platform for bettering the world. And so Vince Lombardi was like my mom's uncle. And so he, I think, really planted a lot of seeds of tenacity.
Vince Lombardi was Mary Ann's uncle.
Correct. Not blood, but like family.
Yeah. No, I get that. But like, so did you spend much time with Vince?
No, I wasn't born yet.
No.
Yeah. So my mom.
What kind of impact did he have on Mary Ann's life?
Massive. I mean, she would say, other than her father, that was the other person that shaped her views of the world.
Wow.
And her tenacity, for sure. She was so she was one of the first models for 17 magazine, very ethnic Italian looking woman. But she was like such a tomboy, and she had a mouth.
How old was she when she was modeling for 17, you said?
So yeah, teenager. Yeah.
15, 16, somewhere around there. And yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think it was I think she was 17 when she started, and into her 20s.
What years are we talking about?
I don't know. It would be in the 60s.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to reverse engineer the math.
Yeah, so she was born in 1940, so the late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah.
So
how cool. Do you still have photos of her in the magazines and all that?
No, I think my aunt does. My mom passed away like 10 years ago. My aunt has like this huge chest just filled with things still. And, she didn't keep all of that many of those things around. Not the way that we do today, interestingly enough. But I think my aunt has all of what is still existing from that.
I hope there's a lot of it.
Well, my mom, she took that strength of that platform and basically became this sassy, mouthy, like woman who ran these campaigns for these politicians, and then pitched this idea for a TV show, basically to like put the politicians in the hot seat, and kind of say like, well, what are you doing? And how do we make things happen? But her obsession was sports. So going back to Vince, her obsession was sports. So most of my childhood, a large part of my childhood, was spent in television studios after school, listening to her shows being done, which I hated every second of it. Like, I just wanted to be outside playing with the other kids. Greatest gift in the world, because we'd have, Pete Rose, Tug McGraw, Steve Carlton, Ron George.
Tug McGraw, that's a name I haven't heard for a long time. I grew up an Expos fan because I was in Montreal.
Yeah.
Tug McGraw, he was a relief pitcher, wasn't he? Yeah. He would come in and fuck the whole game up for the Expos all the time. Wasn't he one of the top, I don't know, 5 certainly or 10 relief pitchers in the game at the time?
Yeah, he was one of the
And what a nickname. Did anybody ever even know his real name? Do you know his real name?
It's funny. I really do think it's Tug. I'm friends with his widowed wife, Diane, and now I'm gonna ask her. I never thought
we can ask the interweb and see, maybe it'll tell us. You think there was a chance that it might be his name?
Yeah, I always thought it was. I never questioned that it wasn't.
Like his parents put Tug on his birth certificate.
Here
it is. According to Wikipedia, it is Frank Edwin Tug McGraw Jr.
Tug is so much cooler than Frank Edwin.
Frank Edwin McGraw Jr. was his name. Although I don't know, maybe his dad's was also nicknamed Tug, but that would be a little bit strange. But yeah, there's his picture, man. Tug McGraw, he was fucking the man.
Yeah, he was. I was good friends with his kids too. I still see his son, Mark. around Philadelphia, but yeah. So these people, these greats were
Do
in
people
my,
in Philadelphia remember?
oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's still a treasure.
Yeah. Big
Yeah.
time. I'm a partner in a company called Thusio, which is a sports management, sports entertainment company that Tiki Barber started. And we do these events with legends all the time. And Tug is included in many of those storytelling escapades of like the wild days back in the Phillies. And so he still lives on as a legend, big time.
That's great. I'm stoked to hear that. That was and of course it was an era where I was a kid, so I have all these romantic memories, and I loved the Expos. I would skip school to go to the games. When the Expos moved to this giant, stupid fucking park, I don't know if you remember Olympic Stadium. We had this pretty little, kind of like minor league park. Actually, it was a minor league park called Jerry Park, and then they moved to this enormo dome that could seat like 70,000 people. Anyway, long story longer, they would sell bleacher tickets for $1. And so we would skip school and go
Wow.
hang out in the bleachers and watch the Expos, right? And the Expos Phillies rivalry back then was, super strong, right? I mean, not as strong as the Pirates rivalry, but yeah, we like to hate the Phillies.
Well, being a Philly girl, I would have to say my love is for the Phillies, but I understand the disappointment because they were legit back then. I think we're going to make a comeback this year, as all the Philly teams seem to be doing right now. Thankfully, we've had some real dry years, but yeah, it's
So
funny.
how did you get involved? I know we're bouncing around a lot, but you've had such an amazing career. How did you get into this sports management side of things?
So basically, doing what I do as an quote unquote expert, right? Where you're utilized in television and content creation, but then I also, speak or I create all these products. Ty Pennington was the first real like breakthrough person who became this expert spokesperson, instead of just a talking head as a host for a show. Ty actually walked the walk, right? For Trading Spaces, for those who don't know who Ty Pennington is, where he was actually the contractor and he was the host, and then he created all these tools and products and was a spokesperson and an influencer. So he really started creating this influencer movement. And I watched him do it because psychologically it was so smart. And I wound up meeting his manager and drilled his manager on a million questions about how he built that model and really modeled that model. And I realized that TV agents, my speaker agents, my TV agents, no one was getting this 360 influencer model. They weren't leveraging it, and they were just riding coattails and just not leveraging people properly. And Ty's manager was one of the only people that I knew that knew how to do it.
And I hate to interrupt you, Groover, but describe the 360 model in your head that you're operating out of.
So the influence now we call it the influencer model. Then it was just kind of this like expert model. So the influencer model is you take a personality who has a value proposition to them. So for Ty, it was that he was a true tradesman in construction that could be a television personality that could have influence and affluence over others, and could have licensing deals, spokesperson deals, speaking deals, author of books, and create this 360-degree program around his brand. And so none of the agents were really knowing how to do it or figure out how to do it, and it was irritating me because I'm with William Morris, and William Morris agents weren't figuring it out. They look at me and like scratch their head, and they're like, "We don't know."
And what was at the time? What was William Morris? How did they position you? What did they think of you as?
That's the problem.
I mean, did they think of you as an on-air personality?
Yeah. So I'd have an on-air personality agent, and then I'd have a speaker agent, and then I'd have a licensing agent, and no one was creating a strategy or a model. So they saw me in fragments. They didn't see me as like.
So nobody saw you as, okay, so she's an entrepreneur inventor here, and she's a TV personality there, and she's representing other products here, and maybe doing licensing deals, and then the speaking and the writing and there was no. That's what you mean by 360.
Correct. Martha Stewart was one of the other like true pioneers in this space too. Like Martha Stewart really created an entire empire around her personality brand, which was basically like.
Is she the ultimate 360 model in this context?
Yeah, I would say that I would say very few people, I mean, Oprah is another example of it, but she kind of backed into it differently. Martha really constructed it around her every strategic deal that she was doing. And I would say people haven't touched that level of Martha Stewart yet. And I believe that there's still a lot of people are still trying to figure out how to do that. Well, what I was getting frustrated because all my speaking engagements, even though I had agents, weren't booking them. They weren't booking these appearances. They weren't doing these spokesperson deals. So I wanted to create my own agency around these experts, these influencers. And there's a platform called Reverb Nation, and that kind of created a platform for artists, musicians, that gave them lift by connecting them to venues and managers and creating.
What year did Reverb Nation come out, Gruber?
I'm going to say it's probably 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, because I remember it, and I remember thinking it was such a cool idea at the time. How well do you think the idea has played out?
One of my good friends was one of the original VCs in it, and it's playing out really well.
Yeah.
You know, they pivoted a couple times in how they were scaling. You know, there's other competition to that model now. They were definitely pioneering that space. I think it's doing really well. It's still growing rapidly. As of a few years ago, probably 4 years ago, they had hit 1 million. So I think they were only 2 years old at that time where they had hit 1 million in their subscribers. Now, God knows what the number is. But basically, I went to Wayne, the venture capitalist, and I said, I would like to skin Reverb Nation and do the same thing for these influencers. And he said, you know, Reverb is not ready to do it. Like they're just too maxed out. They have no bandwidth right now to do that for you. Why don't you go to Tiki Barber? He's actually doing something similar for athletes. And I was like, okay, sure. Well, if you make the introduction, that'd be great. So he did. He made the introduction. I went to meet with the CEO, this guy, Jared, who had come from, oh my gosh, one of the food delivery companies that got bought by Aramark. It's now Grubhub, but it was something before Grubhub. Anyway, Jared and I met, and he said, well, you know, what do you want to do with this? Like, why would you want to skin this for these influencers? And I was like, well, because there's a huge demand for it. There's a huge need to do it. And he said, well, what if we want to do that after the athletes? And I was like, well, I know Tiki's fast, but you guys would be chasing me at that point. And he was like, all right.
Meaner, nonner.
So then Jared said, well, why don't you come help us do this for the athletes, and then we'll do it for the influencers. So now the platform at Thusio has evolved into what's called Julius, and there's over 40,000 plus athletes and influencers on the platform.
And if I'm one of those athletes, sort of give me the point of view or the pitch.
So for the athletes, there's a two-pronged business model that we kind of work on. One is the actual setting up events. We do our own events around these athletes, creating like inside the actor studio events, but for athletes instead of actors.
You're not waiting for them to get booked by a speaking agency to go to speak at a corporate event or a open to the public seminar or whatever.
We do place them there, of course, but we're also utilizing them at every moment we can and putting them in front of their audience at the same exact time, because our Thusio members are all C-suite and above executives or entrepreneurs. So they're the people that are placing them at these appearances and events and things like that. So, the evolution of that part of our business came completely organic. the four Super Bowls ago, when they were playing in New York, when the Super Bowl was in New York, and Tiki said, I want to have a party for the Super Bowl, but I don't want to like everyone just get trashed and wasted. Like there's a million of those parties. I want to demonstrate our platform. And so we invited a bunch of Super Bowl winning coaches who had like a fireside chat Q&A, and with Tiki invited a bunch of his Giants and Jets friends, and we invited about 100 top business influencers. And a lot of these influencers already had suites and things like that, and we did it at a steakhouse, cigars and steaks and talking sports. And it was just such a huge hit because you have a podcast, you're interviewing people, you're pulling things out of them that they might not have ever shared before, or you're hearing it unfiltered where they might not have said it on the news, and or in a magazine that a journalist edited out. You're hearing it really from them, and it's raw, and you're hearing the psychology of what it took to create a Super Bowl winning team, which so for businessmen are sitting there like, this is business, right? Like every lesson applies to business. And so many of those men came back and said, can't we keep doing this? Like, why don't we do this once a month? Like, why don't we just have a steakhouse dinner, have an athlete, and create a theme and story tell? And so that organically became one of our verticals for Thuzo Executive Club early on in the business. Just, that's a fun part of entrepreneurship, right? It's like you start out with this one vision, which was really just a marketplace for athletes. And then you create this whole other vertical. And then the third vertical that exists, this Julius platform, was not ever the intent, but it's probably the most valuable asset is, as we created this marketplace, you have all these athletes and you're tagging them. So if somebody called and said, hey, we need an NBA player who grew up in the Midwest, who likes fast cars, whose mom had cancer, in seconds, we could tell you who they are. And so all of a sudden we realized, at that point, I think we had 30,000 people on the platform, that the data of all these influencers that we held was the greatest asset. And so this Julius vertical of the company was created basically to give huge brands access to all the data around all these influencers that they want to hire for all their marketing campaigns.
So they can micro target per your point around the athlete who has this and that and the mom with cancer, et cetera, et cetera.
Totally. And tell their brand stories more authentically with the influencers' reach and impact. Yeah.
Well, and the interesting thing is, you tell me, I'm not an expert in this area, but it would appear that, quote unquote, the category of influencer marketing is bigger today than ever. Is that what's going on?
And it just continues to grow and grow. I mean, it's crazy.
And how would you define influencer marketing, Gruber?
Identifying personalities that have reach into a conversation that you want to be a part of or want to have a voice in a more authentic way than the actual brand can do for itself. So the influencer is someone who already has reach. They already have a related value proposition in that potential area of what the conversation is. And the influencer can do it more authentically than...
This is why the whiskey companies are paying me $1 million a year to talk about their whiskey on Legends and Losers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm kidding. Nobody's paying me shit.
I like your manifesting moment. That was a good manifesting moment.
Yes, I am now manifesting. It needs to be a good whiskey that I enjoy. It could be Jack Daniels. I know people criticize me for my love of Jack Daniels, but I like everything from, the most expensive peaty whiskey you can imagine, or Scotch in this case, to JD and back again. But the interesting thing about this world, I'm curious to ask you this, in the social media domain,
Mm-hmm.
I did not realize until recently that you could pay someone on Instagram to, put up a photo that you want them to put up and say what you want them to say, and do that in a non-disclosed way. That is to say that the subscriber or the follower has no idea that, such and such celebutard with, 4 million followers on Instagram just got paid $1,000 to drop this photo and say these nice things about this new bag or whatever.
Technically, they're supposed to. I mean, legally, they really are. It's a gray area. It's a new area. It's not as, Kim Kardashian's going to get caught before other people that maybe have less reach. Technically, you are supposed to say that this was you paid for or sponsored, or it should have some sort of disclosure, as minuscule as it is, but something. A lot of people don't do it.
Don't you think it's out of integrity when people don't?
I think, honestly, for some people, if they know that they're supposed to, but honestly, a lot of people don't know that they're supposed to. And quite honestly,
this is where we are now?
Yeah, well, quite honestly.
This is where we are in the world, where people think that you can shill for a fucking product and not disclose that you're fucking getting paid.
Yeah.
I mean, look, whenever anybody comes on Legends and Losers, that's a company that I am involved with in one way, shape, or form, I fucking make it very clear, right?
Yeah. But you're supposed to.
Well, yeah, right? I mean, if I have a financial interest in the company, and listen, I've had entrepreneurs on and venture firms on and so forth where I have relationships. Those relationships are disclosed. Yeah. Right? Because I think people need to know that. Now, and look, I'm not a fucking journalist at all. Now, and I assume most of these influencers aren't either, but, if I tell you I like Wayward Whiskey from Santa Cruz, I'm telling you I like that because I fucking like it. I don't even know those people. I just like the whiskey, right? And so it is a weird area. I guess my point is, you talked a lot earlier, Groover, about authenticity. Mm-hmm. And I think we're entering a new era of authenticity. And we can talk about that if you like. I think we're going to get into, my friend and guest, Kim Scott has her book out called Radical Candor. I think we're going to get to, as part of that idea, we're going to get to radical authenticity.
I love it. I hope you do.
Well, you tell me. I think in the consumer world, the Kardashianization of everything has hit a tipping point where there's a big backlash now.
Yeah. So
I think in the business world, as my friend Eric Weinmeier said, the world doesn't need more bullshit. And there is more business bullshit being spewed on us now than at any time in history.
So why I think it's so powerful, Chris, is because people have options of access to information on all mediums now. And the manipulation can't be as controlled as it used to be. Listen, there's tons of manipulation still happening from a traditional media standpoint and from a consumerism standpoint. But because people have access to see authenticity, to actually see it and get what it is, a lot of times people might not even know, I'm sure you've probably had Gary Vee on here, right?
We have not had Gary Vee on here.
Okay. Well, Gary, I think, was one of the first, people that would go on a plane, start shooting video of himself and start talking about what he was going through and what he was feeling and the frustration, the exhaustion and cursing. And people found it refreshing. That's exactly how I feel. And instead of having everything staged and everything look perfect, and I think the more people are getting authentic and vulnerable and raw and real, people want more of it because it's more identifiable than everything's perfect and I'm perfect and everything just works for me and my hair is perfect when I go on an airplane in the middle of the day and so the more people, even if they don't know what it is that they're feeling, the more people feel that feeling of rawness and authenticity, the more the world's going to demand it and see through the crap that's truly crap. It fine-tunes your intuition of reading people and seeing through people the more you get to see it. And so I love it. I do believe also that we're getting to this radical authenticity. I know as a speaker, talking about emotional intelligence a few years ago, it was so above people. Like what I was saying when I would talk about authenticity or transparency, people were like, what's this woo crazy stuff she's talking about? And now more and more people are like, I get it. I get it. Show your, I go into corporations and HR departments. I know were originally created to help the employees not get taken advantage of, but now the pendulum has swung so far that HR departments and all these rules and regulations and all these like crazy rules that were made up that basically are damaging to people now, where people are treated like robots and you're supposed to behave like a robot. And it's so damaging. And I'll never forget, a few years ago, I was speaking at this Independence Blue Cross, and this woman raised her hand and she said, I said, if you're going through something that's hard for you, a divorce or a loss of a loved one, just tell people, let people know, because if not, you're going to walk in and be in a bad mood. You're forgetful. And if you don't share this stuff, it's going to be misconstrued. And the lady raised her hand. She goes, we're not, and like in corporate America, you're not allowed to do that. And I said, that's the dumbest thing I have ever heard in my entire life. You can't share what's going on in your life. You're so compartmentalized that you're going through something so traumatic and not have it show up in work. That's damaging to people.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And the fact that we got trained, most of us, that we had to be a certain way at work. I mean, when I started at 18 because I got thrown out of school. And so for the first early part of my career, Grover, I was really acting. I was playing the part of what I thought a business person was supposed to be. And it was really, I had some okay results, but not great, right? And the minute I could just say, fuck it, I'm actually just going to be myself. And I just surrendered because I didn't know how to play being a business person anymore. It wasn't working for me. And so the minute I gave that up and I had the inspiration to just let it go, shit changed. Everything changed.
Everything does change. When we step into our authentic self and we own who we are and we feel comfortable in our own skin, and we're not trying to walk through life gaining everyone's approval or be what everyone thinks we're supposed to be, we become so much more immensely powerful. And it was like, when we first met and you were like, I just feel this like energy. And it's not me trying to like throw my energy around. It's me just being me and being convicted in who I am and not wavering in that conviction. And I want to like footnote for people, when someone's being authentic, it doesn't give someone an excuse. Some people abuse this whole authentic conversation. It doesn't give people an excuse to be mean or rude or berate or anything to other people. You can authentically, being authentic is trying to be the best version of yourself. And being authentic is about being honest about who you are and your views, but it doesn't have to be abusive to anyone else in doing that. I know
it's not a license to be an asshole.
Totally.
Right?
Exactly. I've definitely seen some people say, well, that's just who I am. And it's like, well, no, you still want to be a good human being.
Maybe who you are is an asshole.
Right.
The interesting thing I worry about on this topic is, there's been so much lately about men's bad behavior in the workplace. You and I talked about this when we were together in Sacramento, and women in business. And, for me growing up in the tech world, if the topic of women in tech has ever been hotter than now, I can't remember it. And so there's all this discussion going on. And I think that's a very important and valuable thing. And I know there's a lot of men that are scared. Some of them should be fucking scared. But some of them, I start to read these things like men say, oh, well, then what I'm going to do now is I can't meet with a woman alone. Because I can't run the risk, if you and I are working together, I can't run the risk of you either misinterpreting something I say or or saying that I said something that I didn't, or whatever. I always need a fucking witness. If, like,
Yeah.
not to get political, but, the vice president of the United States apparently won't go into a room alone with another woman.
Yeah.
I guess my point is, I'm worried the pendulum's going to go to this stupid place. You know what I mean? I think there's work that needs to get done and shit that we need to talk about. And there's a lot of shit that needs to get cleaned up and fixed. And if the pendulum goes the other way, it's going to fuck things up, and authenticity, there's not going to be any authenticity at all.
You are 1000% correct. And I'm concerned about the same thing. It actually, as women see these stories come out, and there's power going on in the sense of like awareness in the people that deserve it. That's a good thing. But what women aren't recognizing is pretty soon people are going to be afraid to do business with women and be in meetings alone with them, or worry that everything they say is going to be misinterpreted, or any action that they do. Like, I was with one of my friends last week, and they're from the South, and they're just like a Southern gentleman, and they like help women out of cars, and they put their hand on a woman's back as they open the door, like to like escort them in, and it's very gentlemanly. And I actually thought about it for a second, and it hit me, and I was like, man, like that could be what if, God forbid, that's like misinterpreted by somebody, even though it was like being a gentleman. And yeah, so there's a lot of gray area that we're going down a pike that could mess everything up that we're making progress on.
Yeah, and I may, Groover, live to regret this, but I remember very distinctly the conversation we had when we met, and the kind of interaction that we had and all that, and it wasn't that long ago, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there are some men today in this environment, because of all those things, who wouldn't have that kind of, I would describe our interaction as like a full-on interaction. You and I just sort of went into the deep end of the pool together.
I don't know how to swim in the shallow end.
Right? I mean, you and I were locked in conversation. We were going for it. I don't remember all the specifics we talked about, but we were all over it, whatever it was, and really getting into a good conversation. And I know there are going to be men who are not going to go for it like that with women that they first met. They're going to keep their guard up. There's going to be, I guess my point is, both men and women are going to change their behavior as a result of all this stuff. And some of those behaviors need to change. I'm not talking about that at all.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And so here's what I've decided to do. Fucking nothing different.
But you know what you did do that I think was, I think it was actually a very smart thing. And I see men do this all the time in business. And early in your conversation, you talked about your wife, and you made it very clear your respect for your wife and your value of your wife. And I think that that's such a smart thing for men to do. Or if they're not married, if they have a girlfriend, to talk about that girlfriend. Or if they, don't have a significant other, to talk about their mother. But early on, the suggestion of respect for women, or specifically a woman in your life, to me, I think really sends a very clear message to the woman, like in our dynamic, to the woman, that this is literally like two guys talking right now. Like, I have a wife I totally love. I respect my marriage. And I think that although kind of just submissive to or subliminal, to put it in there speaks volumes. And I think it's a great strategy for guys to understand if they are concerned about all this.
It's interesting that you say that, because I don't know that I necessarily deliberately did that.
No, it was very authentic. Yeah, no,
yeah.
It was very authentic.
What I do know is, in all this fucking conversation, there's a lot of dumbasses who say, well, you need to treat men and women the same. Well, I don't agree with that. Men and women are different.
Yeah.
And we need to understand some of those differences, right? And so, and look, you may tell me this is a bad thing, but when I'm in a conversation with a new woman that I just met, particularly in the environment we were in, right? It's kind of after the thing, we're in the bar, there's lots of people around. It's not like we're meeting in a conference room, right?
Right.
And so, and people are drinking, and it's the kind of environment, it's a conference setting, but it's the kind of environment where, shall I say, things could get interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I find myself in those situations with women, I just naturally want to do something to communicate, I'm not your fucking problem,
Right.
right? Like there's a mentality called being a sheepdog, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
sheeps, wolves, and sheepdogs.
Mm-hmm.
And, I try to identify as a sheepdog. I'm somebody for whom if the shit were to hit the fan, I'm going to stand up.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, so it's interesting that you remember that. I'm glad because the place I want to be coming from, with all people, but particularly with women in a situation like that, where shit historically could get weird, is I'm not your problem. You're okay with me.
Yeah. Well, and you communicated effectively. Quite honestly, and you picked this up when we first met. Like I've always been like one of the guys, but I am a girl, and I'm not like, when I say like the guys, like I don't like drama. I don't want to talk about shoes. Like I'd rather be talking about like business and sports and just like having real conversations, and so when I was younger, especially in high school and college, when all girl drama is happening, I was like, peace out, I'm going to a game. And so my conversation with Matt was always just so normal. I was a tomboy, I played sports, but I was still a girl. And I don't want to be treated like I like to be treated that I'm not. I mean, my friend, one of my friends is the first female NFL coach. But
What's her name again?
Jen Welter.
Wow. I
And
remember when that happened, man, that story with that picture of her rocking around the internet and Facebook and shit. And it was so fucking cool.
Yeah. But at the same time, she's going to tell you like, she is powerhouse and she is strong, but she's not going to go up. She's like 5'0" and she's about maybe 90 some pounds, filled solid muscle. But if she was running up against a 300-pound guy, she would get hurt. She would get injured. She's not physically, mechanically made the same size or strength for that matter. And she is one hell of a strong girl, and I would never mess with her. But it's just, there's certain differences that we should embrace, and there are certain similarities we can embrace too. I always say, like, all my business partners are men, and they're all men because we create a greater whole. My business partners have strengths that I don't have, and they have weaknesses that I don't have. And so we create a greater whole. And that's what I really wish the future of this whole gender debate is about. Waking up and realizing, you know what? Women have their own strengths and their own feminine energy and their own feminine power, their own power in that feminine energy. And guys have their own strengths and power in their masculine energy. And if we could stop trying to say one's better than the other, and we could recognize like, hey, you have strengths that I don't have, and I have strengths that you don't have, and together we create a greater whole, so let's stop talking about it and fighting over it. And like make things happen. And I really wish that that's where because it's one's not better than the other. It's just totally different. And a woman's feminine power is very different than a man's masculine power. And it's in certain times and places it's needed. One's needed over the other. And female perspective can help create a male's perspective that might be one way, and female can step in and say, well, I see it this way, and then create a greater solution. And that's really where I would like to see the world go and understand. And
do you think that's where we're heading, Hoover?
I hope so. I feel like, I look at my 13-year-old daughters and their generation, and less and less they're seeing, I think their view of the world is like, oh, the guys, the girls, but like, we're all like people here. Like, we're kind of working together. And, I didn't see it that much growing up because I was in a neighborhood full of boys. And I just played.
Your dad was a huge part of your life growing up, wasn't he?
No, no, not. I mean, yes and no. My dad was an emotionally unavailable, not at all like
But I
role model.
thought he didn't we have a discussion, or was I too many scotches in where you were telling me about how he taught you not to be one of those women?
Yeah, totally.
Whatever he meant by that, you could remind me what he meant by that. But it,
Yeah. So my dad was legitimate. I mean, he's 84 years old, legitimately a male chauvinist. And but one of the things he did teach me is to not act or be in a way that men wouldn't respect and would receive me as part of a community. And he, taught me this, silent strength. I'll never forget one of my first big business deals was with this religious sector that does not respect women, still marries off their daughters, and I went to my dad and I was like, Dad, they don't.
that could be many. That doesn't narrow it down.
Exactly. So I'll just keep it there. I'll just keep it there. And I was like, Dad, like this is such a boys club like this. I've never seen a boys club like this before. Like, what do I do? Like they don't see me, like they don't respect me. And he said, don't say a word, say nothing. Don't try and prove yourself. You're not even on their radar. You just keep doing your thing and they will never see you coming. And I was like, well, what kind of stupid advice is that? And then I thought about it and I was like, oh, that's genius. That's like a sniper attack. You don't want to see them coming. And that was like one of my best, I'd say probably the best business advice I ever got in my entire life. And that goes
Now,
for everything.
I got to interrupt you because you are, at least in my experience, the groover experience is a frontal experience, is a loud experience, we know and I say this with all respect, we know the chick is in the room when the chick is in the room, right? And so, did you have to kind of modify yourself to sneak up on them?
Yeah.
Or did I just meet you at a particularly uh, illuminated time?
I had to bite my tongue a lot. I had to bite my tongue a lot. When I would witness certain things that I knew like they weren't, just respecting a woman's point of view, I would have to, just bite my tongue a lot. They actually were afraid of me. They actually had like a little bit of a nickname of me, like you don't want to, don't do something. She'll call you out on it. Like they would do these kind of things that they would be going on television for right now to women all the time, and I would call them out all the time. Like one of my first encounters, I was married at the time, ring on and everything, and talked about my husband, and the man, after doing a business deal, made an advance at me. Now he's married, had 6 kids. His 2 sons worked like right outside his door. And I was like, I'm sorry. In my religion, this means we don't do that. And he said, well, in my religion, we don't believe we're meant to be with one woman. And I said, I'm pretty sure your wife doesn't know that. And I'm pretty sure that she would not agree with that opinion. And I'm pretty sure she'd be really pissed off right now. And I'm also pretty sure that your 2 sons outside that door right there would be really angry at you disrespecting their mother. And from that moment on, he never, ever did that again. and as a matter of fact, the men in the group, like in this fashion industry group, whenever he would see them even remotely begin to behave that way, he would cut them off and be like, oh, she will shame you. Do not do that to her.
Now, I'm curious, you hear a lot of people who've been in situations like that say they don't do what you did because they're afraid it's going to damage their career, and they have a family to feed, or they have ambitions, or they have whatever, for whatever reason, they feel like there's going to be a meaningful repercussion to telling the harasser, hey, go fuck yourself, don't do that again.
Mm-hmm.
And so did you think about that or no?
Well, I was in a place of power, more so than if I was an employee, right? So they did a licensing deal with me and they had my license. So they had just signed that. So essentially they worked for me. If you really want to like break it down that way, there was definitely moment in that time period where I thought this could screw up my deal. But I really didn't care. I mean, I cared, but I didn't care because I knew if I didn't nip that in the bud that day, that would keep happening to me. And it's not what I wanted to happen. And when I mentioned earlier that my dad taught me to behave in a certain way, that right there was the way. And so, you know, I think those guys really respected me after doing, you know, because I did that, where they put me in a whole different category. Now, if I was an employee and I didn't have a place of power, maybe I might have stifled how I handled it. I don't know. I can't say. You know, quite honestly, I've done what I've done my whole life. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life so that no one could have that much power over me. And that was all very intentional.
Say more about that, Gruber.
So my dad, as I mentioned earlier, was a very emotionally unavailable person. And, you know, he was just repeating some bad cycles in his own life. And, you know, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know how to heal what you don't know how to heal. And unless you have the tools and someone helping you with those tools. So my dad came from a very cold, somewhat abusive childhood himself, became an alcoholic. My mom didn't know when she met him. He was just this like fun, charismatic party guy. And, he was her attorney for a case. I told her she was a model. She had really kinky curly hair. She came to Philadelphia to do a lawsuit, to do a photo shoot, and they tried to straighten her hair and it all fell out. So my dad was representing her in this case, and that's how they met. So my mom fell in love with this very fun, charismatic man, and they get married, and then all of a sudden she realizes that she's married to
Did she win the lawsuit?
She did. Yes.
Did they have to give her a shit ton of money because they fucked her hair up?
I don't know the details of that, but I think so. I mean,
yeah.
if knowing my dad on the case, that was, yeah.
He made them pay, literally.
He made them pay. And he had no remorse in someone else's suffering. So, and so my mom all of a sudden realizes she fell in love with this functioning alcoholic who is really abusive. And now she's in too deep. She's continuously just trying to fix the situation. So most of my childhood was me witnessing abuse, physically, mentally, and emotionally. So my mom, while she was outside of the house, was this badass with so much strength and so much sass, but in her home, she was abused and diminished and falling apart. And so I caught my dad cheating on my mom when I was going into 8th grade. And I was so excited for my mom. Like, yes, you could be free now. You can go find love. You can go like get married to somebody else who's nice to you.
And how old are you, Grover?
I was going into 8th grade at the time.
So what's that, 12?
13. My kid's
13?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Fucking A.
Yeah.
That's not getting your groove on. Fuck. What a horrible thing for a, 13-year-old to have to say or to even feel. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I
mean, the level of abuse and anger and stress in my house was so, I mean, I was sick my entire childhood because my immune system was shot because the stress was so bad.
Wow.
And like, I hated being home. I loved, like, my kids love being home. And I find it to be one of the greatest gifts to me that I am doing something right as a parent, because I could not wait to get out of my house on a regular basis. I could not wait. The second that door opened on a Saturday morning at 8 a.m., I was out and I did not come home until I absolutely had to. And then I still kicked and screamed because that stress was just the heaviness, the fighting, the anger, it was just too much. And so I was excited that my mom would have an excuse to be free. And, but the problem was my dad controlled all of the money. Even though my mom had a job, women back then, like CAP would be the 13 grand. And every Friday as my mom walked in the door, legitimately, my dad would take the check. he controlled all the finances. We would go grocery shopping, and he would literally analyze the grocery bill for fear that my mom like might buy like a $20 something and then return it and have $20 of her own. I'm not kidding, like crazy things. So when my mom and when I told my mom this, my mom knew she had to confront the situation, because now what example was she setting for her daughter? And she said to me, I've known all along, it's just harder to leave than stay. And I was like, what? There's no way, it sucks here. Like, why? How is it possibly harder to leave than to stay? And she said, your dad will literally torture me. And I was like, but he was the one that did the wrong thing. And unfortunately, she was right. My dad basically controlled every dollar and wouldn't give it to her. Not one attorney would represent my mom, because my dad created the laws of the divorce in the state. And the stress of it caused my mom to have a stroke when I was just going into high school. And then she had a massive.
She had tried to separate and then had a stroke, or where in this cycle was that?
So they did, they did separate, but my dad still he wouldn't give us money. He wouldn't give my mom money. So she was literally like living on like people giving her.
But how do you get away with that in the United States? I mean,
because my dad literally puts the stamp, the law, like the stamp of approval on every divorce that goes through.
What was his job at the time?
Divorce administrator.
For the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. That makes it a little harder then, huh?
Yeah. So,
and there was no way to get a unbiased legal proceeding for your mother.
No, eventually my mom had to hire this attorney that would touch the case like 2 years later, when she got enough money, and the guy charged like some ungodly amount of money that even today would be ungodly, just to take the case, because he knew she was in such a desperate state. And yeah, it was bad. But what it did for me in that time of my life was it created a very clear conviction that I was never, ever going to allow someone to control my finances or my happiness. And that's really how I said I created all this intentionally, so no one could ever have control over me having to stay somewhere where I knew it was wrong to stay.
Wow. And so you think in a large part that time in your life is what, your list of achievements could choke a horse. I mean, it's stunning, right? Stunning.
Thank you.
I'm just about to ask you about your future, because I'm very, curious about that. But I mean, was that the catalyst, or, I mean, how do you think about that moment now?
Yeah, I tell everyone, when I tell the story, people say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. And, to finish that story about my mom, by the way, she had another stroke when I was a sophomore in college and lived in a wheelchair for the rest of her life, which is basically being a prisoner in your body. And so that my childhood, I tell people, was my training ground for success. The level of resiliency, adaptability, the ability to find good and bad, the ability to learn how to escape into my imagination when I didn't want to stay where I was, were all massive skill sets to my success. And so, I find it, my daughters, when they were 3, said something so profound to me. I'm very spiritual. And I, probably am so spiritual in healing from my childhood. When a child endures that much trauma, if you don't heal, you then become ill, which I was ill a lot throughout my young life. I have more energy and more well-being in my 30s and 40s than I ever did in my young life combined. And if you don't heal, you become sick, and you also become angry, and you become depressed. And so my spirituality is how I really began this healing journey. My brother, who's only 11 months older than me, did not. And if you could see the massive difference of what happens when someone becomes a victim to their circumstances versus empowered by their circumstances, it is literally night and day. Like, people that find out we're brother and sister are like, how is that even possible? And so psychologically, that's always fascinating to me. 11 months apart, we lived the same childhood, and the difference of who we became as adults is just so starkly different. But the spirituality part for me got me to see life in so much more expansiveness than most people do just for face value. But anyway, without going too deep, I always believe that there's a book called Sacred Contracts that really rocked my world in my late 20s. And it's basically about how our souls choose the life that we're stepping into. We still have free will, but we choose to learn certain lessons in each lifetime so our soul evolves to the next lifetime. And so that was really, really profound for me to rewrite my story of the meaning of my childhood, because it took me a few minutes, like, wait, I chose this? I chose to come into this lifestyle? And now as an adult, later at 44, I could say 1000% I get it and I understand it, and I did. But it was something that really made me question, like, we're choosing our sacred contract for each lifetime journey. And again, we have free will. We can keep like making our mistakes run out decades longer than they need to. We can numb them and run away from them and do drugs and forget our existence, or we can really hit our evolution head on. And my daughters, when they were 3 years old, now remember, 3-year-olds are barely having conversations at this point. And randomly, and I'm not.
Although last time I checked, they communicated their wants pretty clearly.
Yes, exactly.
and diswants, if that's a word, or unwants.
They do. They're displeasing moments. So while I'm spiritual, we don't go to church or anything, and I talk about the universe probably more than I would have said God in their presence. And my daughter Madison, from the back seat, out of nowhere, says, "Mommy, you chose us and we chose you." And I literally stopped the car and pulled over to the side of the road, and I said, "What did you just say?" She said, "You chose us and we chose you." And I said, from who? She said, "God and the angels." And I literally became so overwhelmed with emotion of the validation of what that meant for me and what it means for all of us in the suffering that we choose to give perspectives in, or our ability to say, okay, I chose this to become who I am. I chose these challenges to become the person I am in this lifetime. And without those challenges, I wouldn't be fulfilling that contract that I desired. I mean, I chose that contract. And so, and so when I look at my daughters and I'm like, well, how do I teach them how to be resilient and agile when they're not having the same storm that I had as a kid? But then I recognize that their journey, their soul's journey, is very different than mine. And what they're here to do and what they're here to be and teach is very different than what mine is. And I don't know what it is. It has yet to be seen. But I do know that, if we could recognize that in our lifetimes, that nothing has meaning until you give it meaning, and everything that we encounter, there's wisdom in it for our own evolution, then nothing is that bad as we experience
it. Amen. Hallelujah, sister.
Yeah.
Owning my circumstance is the first step, right?
Yeah. Well,
because the minute you own your circumstance, you're not a victim anymore.
No.
Right. I had an amazing dialogue a little while ago with the legendary Hal Elrod, who you know.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, so, as a 20-year-old man, he's dead. I think he was dead for 6 or 8 minutes, something like that. And all of his bones are shattered by a drunken driver in that car accident, all that stuff, right? And then he goes on to become Hal Elrod, Miracle Morning, all the amazing stuff. He's incredible. He's a treasure to humankind. And then the fucking guy gets, this horrible form of cancer. And somehow when you're with him, like, of course he has moments where he says, Lord, why me? But that's not the place where he lives from. Far from it, right?
Yeah.
It's incredibly powerful when you can just choose this shit and move forward. Because when we choose it, we're not a victim anymore.
Correct.
We
Yeah.
own it now.
Yeah.
It
We do.
doesn't own us. And that
Mm-hmm.
it sounds to some like semantic bullshit, but it really is a very powerful coin flip when you say, I own
Yeah.
whatever it is. I own my mess, whatever that mess is, and whether it's a mess of my creation or not. Right?
Yeah. Well, and it's also, I own my perspective to it. It's the only thing we have control of is our perspective. It's the only thing you have control of is your perspective. So if you know that you have the power to see every circumstance positively, so a lot of negative people love to come at me on this one. And they're like, well, I mean, that's not really real. I mean, if someone takes advantage of you, they're taking advantage of you, and you need to let them know, like, and punish them for it. And I say to them, what does that get you? I mean, if I choose to see everything in the unicorn rainbow world that I like to live in, it only helps my health and well-being. It takes stress away from me. It takes anger away from me. So why not just do it? Does it feel better to be angry at someone? Does it feel better to be?
So if you go back to our authentic discussion, how do you juxtapose, Groover, the difference between what you're saying here and, hey, look, sometimes shitty shit happens in our life,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Mom gets a stroke. Mom had a fucking stroke. That's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to own that. And sometimes we do shitty shit or we make a big mistake or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we need to own that shit too.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you think about, on one hand, I don't want to be a Pollyanna, but on the other hand, if something really shitty happens to me, Hal gets cancer, he is going to find the good in it. And I don't think that's being Pollyanna. So I'm very curious, because I think this is a very important discussion, how you think about the lines between those things.
So, like I said earlier, I believe that there is wisdom and a gift in every single thing. And sometimes it's hard to see immediately. But my goal is to find that in every situation. So shitty things do happen, but what's the gift from it, right? The gift from my childhood is that my soul, my being, was challenged to evolve into a person that is able to help heal so many other people, because I don't know if I could do that if I hadn't felt the pain. Like, I can feel depth of pain. I can feel depth of empathy and compassion for people, depth of understanding for people. So many people say, well, whatever happened with your dad? I feel empathy for him. As terrible as it was what he did, he was only working with what he had. He was coming from a cycle of pain. He was coming from a cycle of abuse. And so he was just operating from the tools that he had. And, so maybe he only had a piece of plywood and a hammer and he couldn't build a good house. Right. And so, it takes you to check out of your ego and check into your soul in order to be able to do those things. And I would rather live in my soul and say, yes, that happened to my mom, and yes, that happened in my childhood, but the pain that I felt gives me so much power and desire and ability to help other people get out of their pain, and to help raise the awareness of our world, raise the consciousness of our world. So I can say, wake up, people, like, you're wasting your time on nonsense. And this is not what life is about. Like, who cares about all this superficial crap? Like, let's focus on I say to people all the time, I live like I'm going to die tomorrow and live forever at the same exact time. And I always say to people when they're fretting stupid stuff, like, at the end of your life, does this really matter? And you use Hal as an example. I don't know Hal. I know who he is, and I know all of you guys are connected to him. I know that Hal is living with greater gratitude than he already did in this moment and circumstance, and using every day he has with so much more magnitude than he did when he thought he was living forever.
Yeah. And, you know, he was living pretty full on before cancer.
Yeah.
You know, as he said, he's like, hey, how many life-threatening things do I need, dear God, to wake me up to whatever level you're trying to wake me up to? But apparently he needed one more.
Yeah, totally. Well, and see, that's such a positive perspective. Like, he's getting like, I needed to wake up. I needed to wake up. My dad almost died 2 years ago of colon cancer. He didn't even know he had it. His colon had gotten this mass tumor in it, and his colon flipped, and he became septic, and he literally like almost died. And he woke up. He woke up almost a totally different person. Like, grateful for life, grateful for family. And I felt bad. It took him to get to 82 and almost dying for him to appreciate life and love and family. Like, at that late in life, I felt bad for him. Like, wow. But that was his waking. He woke up. Like, and sometimes it takes those kind of experiences to wake people up. But what I want to be is a catalyst or a tool provider in the people that want to wake up.
Yeah. Yeah. You and me both. And the other thing I love about this conversation is we only teach what we most need to learn, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Always.
So
Because
Gruber,
we can identify it with it. We can actually feel it. I mean, I can't teach something that I don't feel.
yeah. Yeah. Otherwise it's inauthentic, right?
Correct.
And all kidding aside, people who are going through tough shit in life can relate to people who've been through similar tough shit and come out the other side and are living great lives in a way they can't relate to people who haven't been through that shit, who may have wonderful things to teach them, but it's different when there's that misfit connection, right?
Lack
Or
of
that struggle connection, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Well, quite honestly, I think people say, well, what do you know? Right. You know, I share my story all the time when I start speaking, because one of my business mentors, this guy, Steve Harrison, earlier on in my career, looked at me and he goes, you do realize when you start speaking, most people assume that you are a cheerleader and just this happy girl that everything happened for, and you probably got a brand new car on your 16th birthday, and you got to go to college where you wanted to go, and just everything was perfect for you. And I was like, what? First of all, I hated cheerleading. Secondly, like, why? Why would they think that? And he goes, because if you look at you and who you are at this moment, and you don't know the context of what you went through to become who you are, you would assume like you were this happy, peppy person your whole life that just always chose to see positive. And what would you ever know about struggle? And he forced me to share my story. And I was so resistant to it because I felt at that time it was like weak. I felt that it was burdensome to people. You know, I just didn't know how important it is for us to share our flaws and share our stuff and the mess that we have. And the more I do it, Chris, the more I realize how much more people have in common. The alcoholic, abusive father, the, you know, child, like I was molested by my cousins who were babysitting me when I was a kid. And I share that story and people are like, oh my God. So, and so all those people that were hiding that in shame for so many, I mean, you couldn't control that when you're a 5 or 6 year old child. Like, why would you sit in shame in that your whole life? And so the more I share my stuff, the more I realize that so many people have stuff that they live in shame with their whole life, or they live in fear of sharing. And that creates more pain.
Yeah, we got to get that shit out.
Yeah.
We got to unpack the Samsonites before we can get rid of them, right? And stop dragging them around.
Totally.
Yeah. And the other thing too that I love about what you're saying, Gruber, is that particularly in what you do, you could play a character, right?
I wouldn't even know how to. I don't even
I
like
know
taking
you wouldn't. I know
Halloween.
you wouldn't. But if I look at what you do, you're this. I don't know. Is it? Can I call you a business celebrity? What do I call you?
That's fine.
And so there's an element of that. You're a person in the world that's known, right? This business celebrity, and you've done a lot of stuff to put yourself in the world. And so it would be very easy for you to play this character of, hey, I'm this super successful gal, and I've been on TV, and I've built these companies and brands, and I'm this spokesperson for this, and I'm got this talent management company over here with Tiki and all the super ding dong athletes, and all your Shark Tank friends, and I don't know, you live in this incredible world. And so it would be very easy for you to just play this part. You're obviously an attractive gal, and you could pretend to be this thing that would be nothing but like a sort of almost like a, trying to think of a good analogy, but almost female Darth Vader-y, like this scary, super successful, I have it all, you don't, go fuck yourself, don't you wish you were me, Kardashian-esque asshole, right? It'd be very easy for you to play a character like that, right? You know what I'm talking about.
I totally know what you're talking about. I actually sadly know some of those people.
Yeah, I know you do. You're in that world.
I just.
So why did you choose not to play that character?
I am so proud of my scars and my bruises and my bumps and my realness. Like, I love being real. I love when every single person that meets me says, wow, like, I feel like I know you. Like, I feel like you're like my girlfriend. I feel like you're like, I could go out for drinks with you. I love that because I find it one of the most asinine things in the world that people that do what I do, that try to teach human potential and excellence in business, they go on stage and they talk, and then they get off stage and then they have bodyguards around them, or they won't talk to anybody. And I will call each and every one of them out on it because it is such a hypocritical thing to be doing. You're telling people how to be better people, but you're not in the mix with the people. You need to get in the trenches with the people.
Were you and I just talking about this, about like some of these folks who like they won't interact with the audience and they'll only deal with questions ahead of time? Or did we have this conversation?
No, but I have, yeah.
Then I had a similar thread with somebody very recently on this, that there are these people who act like they're all, open and great and easy to be with and all that. And they're these, human potential gurus or business gurus or whatever the fuck they are. And then, but they come in with security and nobody can get near them, and, none of that stuff. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I will literally bring it to everyone's attention who does it because it's the most ludicrous thing for me. Being spiritual, I kind of always think of like Gandhi or Mother Teresa. And I kind of always think like, I love and respected how they would just be one with the people. Like, they would just be with the people, because how do you understand what people are going through if you're not in the trenches with them? How do you get better and keep evolving in what you're teaching if you're not staying up with the evolution of what's happening with everyone in the world, and putting your head in the sand of like, well, I don't have to struggle anymore, so I shouldn't care. I mean, that's crazy. I love learning from people, and I love learning from people in all walks of life, and I just love being real. Where I'm from in Philadelphia is known, like, if you say this place to people who know it, they'll just say, like, if I
what's
say,
the place?
it's called Delco.
Delco?
The county right outside of Philadelphia, and it's Delaware County, and the short term is Delco. And the second anyone who understands what Delco is, and I'll explain what it is in a second, anyone who knows what Delco is, and then they know me, they go, oh, that explains everything. Got it. Okay, good. Because Delco is an area that's middle class. There's some upper middle class, but mostly middle class, hardworking, blue collar, and if you're not real, people will call you out on it in 2 seconds. Like, if you're blowing things up, or you're making something look greater than it is, or you're like trying to brag about something, people will call you out in 2 seconds, and that's just what it was your whole life. So you just didn't do it. So the realness of everyone there is just so wonderful. And what you see is what you get. And it's what it is. And so I really don't know how to be any other way. And when I see people not being real, and being in the place of, I'm a human potential guru, or some expert, it to me is just like that one of the highest forms of being a hypocrite possible. So I like realness. Realness is fun. I mean, it's fun. You just get to be silly and do stupid things, and you didn't put yourself on a pedestal, so you can still be real. Like, it's boring. Like, that's why you'll probably laugh at me, but when I go away places, I won't stay at like the Ritz-Carlton or those kind of places because they're boring to me. I want to go where people are having fun, like acting crazy and not worried about what everyone's thinking about them. The energy is just so much more appealing to me. And that sums me up, I think, right there. People are like, why are you staying at the Ritz or the Four Seasons? And I'm like, because it's boring. Everyone there's to themselves.
I love it. Anything else before we kick out of this wave, Groover?
No, I think I'm good.
Oh, I know you're good. You're fucking awesome.
Thank you.
Well, I can't thank you enough. You're a huge light in the world. You're a shit ton of fun. You're incredibly smart and driven and inspiring. And your story is an inspiration to me, and I know to many, 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 many others. I love your work. I love the shit you write about. And I think what you do is really important. And I love the fact that you're not just building companies and products anymore. You're out in the world trying to help other people build their life and their business. So that's a cool way to also make a living. So I just want to thank you for your time, Groover. You're awesome.
Likewise.
And I really appreciate it. And I most appreciate who you are in the world.
Thank you. Likewise. And thank you for having me on. And it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I really did feel like I might as well had a beer here. Except I have to go speak at St. Joe's University in 2 hours.
Any speech worth giving is worth giving drunk.
I haven't tried that yet, but we'll see.
Have you never done a speech drunk?
No. I
have once.
Yeah? And how'd it go?
It was one of the best speeches I ever gave. And that's not my opinion. There was a standing O at the end of it. But here's the thing. It was a morning speech.
What? How did that happen? From the next
fuck. I don't know that I want to tell the specifics because it'll out the other people I was involved with. So I don't know that I have permission to do that. If it was just me, I would tell you all the specifics. But the net of it goes like this. I was out at a business dinner with some buddies. We had something very good happen, and we just started drinking. And we just kept drinking and drinking, and we were drinking Manhattans. Yeah. And holy fuck, did they ever come up on you? Anyway, we got so fucking drunk, we could barely make it back to our hotel rooms. The alarm goes off in the morning. I wake up. I can't believe how drunk I still am. I think it might have been the drunkest I was the morning after the night before, maybe ever in my life.
Wow.
And I had to go give this speech for this company at their big giant company meeting. And I was the morning guest speaker. And I was like, I figured, okay, well, the minute I eat and, have some coffee, I'll stabilize the patient. I mean, there's just no way I can't get the plane right. And sure enough, they're putting the mic on me and doing all the pre-speech stuff that you know well. And I am thinking to myself, holy fuck, Self, you are so fucking still drunk. Holy fuck. And yeah, I just found that gear that you try to find when you're in a stupid position and to get out of it. And I gave a great speech, but that's the one and only time I've given a speech drunk.
You were in the zone. You were literally like, you got yourself in the zone. That's amazing.
Well, you can force yourself there if you want. You know that.
Yeah. Oh, well, I sometimes feel like the zone, I mean, not like condoning drinking and then going to give a speech, but I actually, I feel like it takes the filter away, so you can actually get into the zone sometimes faster in that condition, because just go. Like it just, I love when I'm in that zone and I get off stage and I'm like, I have no idea what I just said.
Yeah, exactly.
It worked.
Yeah, exactly. They seem to have liked it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Groover, I know you're going to go give a legendary speech today, as you always do.
Thank
And
you.
thank you so much. Be
Thank
legendary,
you.
my friend. We'll talk soon.
Likewise. Hope to see you soon.
You bet.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Knock 'em alive. Whew. There she is. Wow. It's incredible what one person can accomplish. It's as if she's lived multiple lifetimes. Groover, thank you. You're an incredible inspiration, and I appreciate the conversation. And if you love this conversation with the legendary Jen Groover as much as I do, why not share it on social media right now? We would love you if you checked out legendsandlosers.com. We have an awesome website. And to make sure you keep up with everything, all the cool stuff we have going on, subscribe on legendsandlosers.com and you'll never miss anything. All right. We would like to thank the great book, What If and Why Not, by our guest today, Jen Groover, How to Transform Your Fears into Action and Start the Business of Your Dreams. HarperCollins Instant Classic, Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Equity Directory. If you're in the startup ecosystem, if you work in the startup world, you need to be on equitydirectory.com. They connect startups and talent to the resources they need to build a legendary business. Our good friends at NetSuite, the world's most popular cloud management system for growing companies. Learn how to grow your business. Check out netsuite.com/legends. That's netsuite.com/legends. OneLifeFullyLived.org. Dream, plan, and live your best life. We're the nonprofit trying to make a difference. Check us out, OneLifeFullyLived.org. Our good friends at PursuingResults.com. They produce legendary podcasts, and this one too. If you want to get into podcasting, go to PursuingResults.com. And speaking of getting into podcasting, if you're a thought leader, if you're an author, if you're an executive, check out interviewvalet.com, podcast interview marketing. You be the guest and they do the rest. They will get you on the leading podcast and get your leading thoughts where they need to be. Our good friends at Fathom, digital marketing that drives revenue, at fathomdelivers.com. The amazing, inspiring, extreme transformation expert, poet, and public speaker, Will Little. He's been on Legends and Losers. He's one of the most powerful speakers ever. Check out willvlittle.com and WWF, because our planet and wildlife matters. Check out World Wildlife Fund, WWF.org. Now, we must remind you that this oddcast is the sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and we would love it if you shared the shit out of it. All rights do remain disturbed. We must remind you that this oddcast is clearly produced in a studio that does contain nuts. Hey, man, that suit is you. In the event of business bullshit, please take 2 Legends and Losers and tweet us in the morning. That's a good one. Come on, that's a good one. Never jog near a prison. Don't forget to eat your skinny pasta. If you haven't changed your mind lately, how do you know you have one? Support your local entrepreneurs. Watch out for Putin. Thank you, Dandy Candy. Love your mom and dad. And hey, Colin, this oddcast really ties the room together, doesn't it? Today, our deepest apologies go out to Martin Scarelli, CEO of Turning Pharmaceuticals. Sorry, Marty, we just ran out of time for you. That's it. Thank you for investing your life with us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on another episode of Legends and Losers.